Hello, I am Bentham and welcome back to Factorio Railworld, where we are in the process of making our way around the lake and installing a series of radars. We've sent the radar train on ahead to the midpoint because we had a little bit left to do back here, but once we've run out of our materials we'll make our way up to the midpoint, rendezvous with the train, resupply and finish off the stretch that we're working on. We're currently about 2/3 of the way between Megacopper 1 and the Midpoint Base, so it should not take too long to get our work complete, and then I think we'll stop there. I think for the moment we'll leave the second half of the lake. There's nothing actually around there to watch. There's no trains running along that. We have it all scanned already, I think, so it's not so much of an important thing to do. But we'll get this all finished and decide what we're doing from there. And while we're working out where we're going to put all our radars as we work our way along the line, make sure everything's connected and make sure we get as much coverage into the lake as possible, I'm going to talk about something that was in the most recent Factorio Friday Facts. It is becoming something of a tradition in this series on Factorio Towns at this point. But yes, I've already talked about it a little bit. I mentioned it in the last Towns episode that they were thinking of doing a bit of changing to how research would work, making green a bit harder maybe, or blue a bit easier, and making it so that there is more research to do in the very late game. But there were a few other things they mentioned as well. They were talking about how to make resources a bit more interesting, make it so that they resources can be like more abundant further out and things like that, so you've got more reason to sort of send long-range trains out into the depths of the wilderness to get as much ore as possible. And also some discussion on how to make it so that you have a sort of a way of prolonging how long some ore lasts. So either making it infinite but slow in the same way as oil does, or also they were thinking about making it so you could get a sort of alternate kind of ore that is more efficient but requires an extra stage of processing to make it usable and things like that. But I'll talk about those some other time, and maybe later on in the episode. What I want to mention is something that they sort of skimmed over. They mentioned it briefly and then moved on to other things, but they talked about changing the capacity of cargo wagons. And in case they do indeed do that, I will give viewers in the future a bit of historical context or whatever. So at the moment, cargo wagons have a capacity of 30, as you can see there. And in fact, what we're doing at the moment is we've arrived in the Midpoint Base. We ran out of materials for making radars, so we've gone up to the midpoint to get some stuff from the train that we set ahead. But unfortunately, because I parked it in the Megatrain station, it got loaded up with all the random stuff that the Megatrain is supposed to get. So the first two cargo wagons, they're all full of filters, so nothing changed there. But the third one is now full of ammo, and the fourth one had a couple of bits of destroyer drones in them, but I just gathered those up and carried on. So we'll try and sort of fix this. It's a bit of a mess because not only is the train full of ammo, but a bunch of extra ammo has now been produced. There's supposed to be like 5 stacks or something in stock in the midpoint, and there's now like 15 of each. And the system's still desperately trying to resupply me with ammo as I try and sort all this out. But what I'm going to do is load most of it up onto the radar train and just take it back to the main base with me, because it's more likely that I'll get use out of it there, and it can get loaded onto the mega train or something next time we use it. And of course we can make use of the destroyer drones, because we were already a bit short of those as the situation was. So once we've got all that fixed, we'll put like filters and blocks in the train to make sure there's nothing else gets randomly loaded onto them, and we'll start preparing to go back. And I also decided to load it up with concrete as well, because we want to get some more concrete in the Megacopper base, and there's plenty here already, and it's getting automatically resupplied anyway, so it doesn't matter whether we get it from the main base or from the midpoint really. So we'll load up the fourth cargo wagon with it, and then when we're on our way back we will make use of it in Megacopper. So yes, currently cargo wagons have a capacity of 30 slots, and there was a time in the past where it was 20 or possibly 16 in the very distant past. Everything was factors of 2, so it would have been 16 rather than 20, and because everything was 8s and 16s and such, and 32s. But what they're thinking is increasing it to anywhere between 40 slots and 60 slots, which is double what it already is and triple what it used to be. And I don't like the idea of this. The reasoning behind it was it would make trains more viable, it would make them easier to use, so you'd be more likely to want to use them, because you'd, like all the current trains that I would have, if they went from 30 slots to 60 slots, could be half the current length. So pretty much every train would just be one cargo wagon. And that would be more than enough, not counting actual unloading times. They'd all be one cargo wagon, and the mega train would be 5, and the radar train would be 2, and things like that. And if there was a throughput problem, it could potentially be fixed by the loader, which I mentioned in a recent Living with Biters episode. That might be a way of rapidly unloading cargo wagons at pretty crazy speeds, really. So yeah, I don't like the idea of it because I think the trains are all too short then. I don't want all my trains to just have one cargo wagon. I don't want the mega train, which is supposed to be like this insane, huge, like fortress of a train going around, just being 5 cargo wagons long. I like it being 10. If I could justify it, I'd make it 20 long. I'd make it insane. And have like engines interspersed through the middle and all sorts of random things like that. But the thing is, I already can't justify something that crazy, and if the cargo wagon size is double, then I can barely justify something with 10 cargo wagons, and that doesn't seem right, because that's what real trains are like. Real trains have, like, crazy amounts of wagons usually. You'd be... well, it sort of depends on what you're using. Like, passenger trains in England can sometimes just be 2, and it's like combined engines and passenger wagons and things like that. But like, if you go to like cargo trains in like America and stuff like that, they've got like 5 engines and 200 like cargo wagons and crazy stuff like that. And I want to be able to do that sort of thing in Factorio. So I think it should stay at 30. In fact, I'm not even sure if it should have ever gone up to 30 from 20. I think keeping the capacity low allows you to do cooler things with trains and have them bigger and more realistic as well, and I prefer that. I like more reasons to have supersized trains, so maybe I'll do more of that, because so far all the trains I've been using are actually relatively small. A lot of people will use like 4 cargo wagon trains and things like that, but I've never sort of... I've always gone for the sort of smaller scale one anyway. But I would like to like have a game where like I have 8 cargo wagons on the trains and they come from millions of miles away, and that is actually something that you could get from the resource changes that they're thinking of doing, making it so that things are more abundant further out and the deposits are larger and things like that. So I would definitely like to see that, but I wouldn't like to see changes to the trains. I want reasons to have insanely long trains and insanely huge stations, and it does make them less viable because you have to do more messing about to make them work, but I like that. I like having to work on that. And it's possible that if they do increase it to 60 or even to 40, I might just put limits in all the cargo wagons anyway, and have more fun with the really long trains. And I'm even sort of thinking maybe deliberately have them slow, like have one cargo wagon pulling 10. No, have one engine pulling 10 cargo wagons and crazy things like that, just to make them sort of ponderous and crazy and stuff like that. But I don't know. I am sort of sacrificing the efficiency of my base for sort of making things look cooler in that sense. But I like doing that in certain cases, and particularly with trains, I like making them particularly fun. But anyway, we have nearly finished now with the radars. We are on our way to the midpoint. We've gone there and come back, and we're sort of at this point expanding from both directions at once and just working out a convenient way to sort of merge them nicely. Still making sure to go right up against the water, but at this point it doesn't matter too much. We are mostly beyond the unscanned area, but I think we're close enough that we could sort of scan it from above, so it does still make sense to have the radars pushed right up against the edge. And there's some weird things with chunks along here where like you have to go right up to the edge of the water to be in the correct, like to be in the furthest chunk you can be, and stuff like that. So I'm having to do sort of homemade, messy like situations here where there's 2 turrets, but they're defending 2 different sections, which is a little bit weird, but that's fine. And I think we're then 1 away from completing our coverage. I think we might have coverage on the entirety of the railway already, but no, there's 1 little gap along here that we will make sure to fill in. It's getting very sort of patchwork now and a bit of a mess, but it doesn't matter this far out. It's not like we want to get a proper grid going around here. We do have a sort of grid going on in the midpoint itself, which is the more important bit. And of course that's all connected up to the power lines and stuff, so it stays running. Actually, looking at it, it's not a grid at all. I've just put them at like the 4 corners sort of situation. But anyway, we will deal with some of the biter bases around here. They have been pushing ahead since last time we pushed them back. You can see there's a sort of clear line that shows how far It shows where I drew the line last time, and where I said all biters beyond this point will not be allowed to continue. And so I'm just going to contain that line. Sometimes when I expand it, when I cut back the biters in the main base, I'll push the biters back a little bit further as well. But with this one, I'm just going to sort of maintain the current situation and deal with the sort of 5 or 6 bases that have sprung up in recent times beyond the line that I sort of established before. And these are all new bases as well, of course, so they're all they all have a good supply of behemoths, making things difficult for me, but I just spam extra destroyer drones to make sure there's no problem, and that all goes fine. And that is our work done with the radar train for the moment. At some point we will go around and do the top half, but I think I'm going to leave that till later. At some point we should be building something up there anyway, which will make things a lot easier when we do it, because otherwise it's going to be this very long journey. There's going to be a lot of resupply runs and things like that, whereas with Megacopper and the Midpoint, there was only really 1 or 2 times where I was actually without the train. Well, I was without the train a lot of the time just because I couldn't leave it on the line, but I always had enough supply till I got to the train and things like that. So we'll make sure the train is ready. We've got a nice stock of concrete, and we're also going to grab a bit of wood for the 3rd cargo wagon, just because there's crazy amounts of it at the moment in the Midpoint. We've got like a full requester chest of it by the station, as well as a nearly full storage chest as well. So we'll just unload as much as we can into the train and take it back to the main base. It's not that much use in either place, but the main base does at least have the backup power system that does use wood, but it's not been running for a while now. We managed to fix the power issues, if I remember rightly, or perhaps we just stopped using power so much. So there's no particular urgent need for it, but it's good to have it around. And if we ever need copious amounts of wood, we're more likely to be in the main base at the time. So we'll make our way back, but we will stop off at the Megacopper base. Not much has happened since we've last been here. It's been like barely an hour since we left, but we have a bunch of concrete we want to make use of, and there's always a little bit more done in terms of mining drills to pay attention to. So we're just going to concrete the entire station area and a bit above it as well, because at some point we're going to expand the station area upwards to have 2 or maybe even 3 stations. Who knows how crazy we'll go with it. So we'll just sort of concrete that in anticipation, and we'll not concrete the deposit itself quite yet, because that's always a little bit more confusing and always looks strange, having concrete underneath the ore deposits. But we've got 30 stacks of the stuff, which is more than enough to get coverage on sort of the main bits, and then just sort of carry on and make a bit of a square up here. Unfortunately, we don't quite get that road done, but that's fine. We'll come along later with some more concrete and get that fixed. And then before we leave, we will check up on the miners. There's a couple of ones around the place that have run out for one reason or another, and I also decided to set up one just on the end of that line to make it a little bit neater when we expand things. We made a bit more progress down in that corner, but that's not particularly urgent anyway. At some point we'll have a loop put in place there. But the main bit is this central column here, which is annoyingly not going particularly fast, but then none of this outpost is at the moment. We're not using that much copper relative to like the sort of things we've been doing in the past. There was a point where like this many miners might have all been running at once if we were really going at full speed, but at the moment there's no big projects going, but I do have some plans to implement some big projects fairly soon. Anyway, just as we're trying to leave and go back to the main base, we get held up by a bunch of copper trains, and it's the main reason that I want to sort of have a second station in place here. But it turns out to be convenient because a stone train turns up as we're waiting, and I actually hop onto the stone train instead. I send the radar train back to the main base. We'll sort out all the wood and stuff that's got loaded onto it a little bit later. But I take the stone train up to the midpoint. I don't really want to take it to the midpoint. I want to go to the stone outpost, but this is the direction it's going in, so I decided to just follow it and see how things go. But yes, the front cargo wagon was completely empty, even though it's just come from the stone outpost, stone 1, or stone outpost 1, or whatever it's called. And as I expected, having looked at the radars, it looks like there was no ore left, and indeed it would appear that that is the case because the train has not been loaded at the front. The rear cargo wagon still had a bit left, but when I arrived at the midpoint, that all got used up, and that's probably because of all the concrete that I loaded onto the radar train before I left. There's been a sudden increase in the need for stone, and so it's all been used up there. So that would suggest that at the moment we don't have a stone supply anymore, and we should probably do something about that. So I'm taking the train back to Stone Outpost 1, and we'll make sure that everything is actually run out, because last time I went there, I realised I'd actually missed a bit of stone, so I got that being mined as well, so I'm not sure whether there might be a bit more that I've not spotted or whatever. But I imagine that it's all empty, and so we will shut it down, decommission the trains, and work out where we will get our future stone from, because of course we want to keep it running for all the rails. We will occasionally build, we're not building that many rails at the moment, but we will build them from time to time, and at some point we might have some big project again. And of course there's a lot of concrete that we want to make, and indeed when we arrive it is completely empty. There's not a single bit of stone left on the line, not even from like a splitter or anything, because sometimes you end up with them, like when splitters split it, they leave a little bit behind on one end. But yes, there is not a single bit of stone left, and while we're here, the other stone train turns up as well. And that does have a bit of stone left, only in the rear cargo wagon again. So I decide to hop on board that one. I send the other one to the spare train area, and then we'll make sure to direct this one back to the stone unloading area, and then into the spare train area as well. But unfortunately, the spare train area is full. It's only got capacity for 2 trains as things stand, and we already have the 2 trains from Iron Outpost 1 in there. So I'll just sort of squeeze it in and make a bit more space for it, but there's still no room for the other one. But luckily that one can just sit in the stone one unloading area for the moment while we work out what to do. So it does look like we need to build a larger storage area, or just get all these trains working again. And that is the thing, we need a new stone outpost and a new iron outpost, and that would get all these trains being used. And then there's just the one random engine that I've left sat around there that I need to probably just deconstruct or whatever. But I think we might soon build a new larger scale parking area or something. Now that Iron Outpost 1 is finished, we have this space below to make use of to build some sort of new rail project. The only thing in the way, though, funnily enough, is a stone deposit, so I guess we'll get it mined. This will fix our stone situation for the moment. We can focus on sorting out an iron deposit, and hopefully the stone deposit will be cleared away in time for us to get back and start building some sort of new rail structure at the bottom here. Because at the moment we haven't needed any more unloading areas. There was an original sort of I left that sort of empty so that I could have more unloading areas if I really needed to, but it seems like the stations that we have are enough. Maybe I'd add in one more, but as it is, I think we can just have a nice train yard, like some sort of shunting area and some sort of cool thing like that. I would like to have a couple of cargo wagons full of random materials that I can just shunt around and take to sort of emergency areas, like if somewhere urgently needs a bunch of iron ore for some reason, I can have a wagon of that handy, or some cool thing like that. Though I haven't really set up this particular safe already. I've set up towns for that a lot more. Towns can make a lot more use of one-off shipments of certain materials and things like that, and it'll be a lot of fun to mess around with that kind of thing. But as it is, we can have a little parking space for trains that aren't currently in use and things like that. Just that we don't have any other issues with having too many trains being decommissioned at once and just being sat around not doing anything. But I decided that seeing as we want to clear this away, and we also want a bunch of stone for the midpoint to keep the to resupply all the concrete, we should probably just get this mined at turbo speed. We'll just set them up as compressed as we possibly can and get it mined through as quickly as we can. And that way we'll be able to work on it as soon as possible, and without having to sort of stand around and wait for it to be sorted. Unfortunately, there's not enough of a stone supply to get to the rear cargo wagon with the current setup I'll do, but I'll just change it so that we have a splitter and it gets split evenly between the front and rear cargo wagons. But as it is, it shouldn't matter that much anyway, because I don't think there are any unloading areas that have a preference for one or the other. It'll just be a case of one of the cargo wagons will build up, so then it will go to the other and things like that. But anyway, we recommissioned one of the Iron Outpost trains to unload stone from the Iron Outpost station, because it's turned out quite conveniently, actually. Iron Outpost 1, just after finishing, suddenly has another job to do, so we'll have it running once again for a short time. And it's sort of a similar situation to the other stone deposit, actually, because that used to be Copper Outpost 2, I think. One of the Copper Outposts, and then that got turned into Stone 1 for a long time. So for a while, Iron Outpost 1 will be Stone 2. So yes, next episode we will start looking at getting a new iron supply, probably a new stone supply as well, and we'll see how far we get with the stone mining here. So we'll finish off the episode, quick bit of inspection of the main base, and in anticipation of the work next episode, I grabbed some extra rails. But yes, have a quick look around. Everything seems to be fine. Still not built up destroy drones, but we'll get there soon enough. And so I shall make my way back to the middle and say goodbye. Thank you for watching, and I shall see you next time.